In football, things move very quickly. One day you have a dream of playing for a certain club, the next, you're wishing you never made that move. Perhaps the biggest example of this in recent history is Alexis Sánchez. Shortly after he left Arsenal to join Man United in January of 2018, he regretted it and wished he could go back. Well, there are some players who are going through that exact same thing right now, and we're going to talk about them in this video today. These are 7 players who wish they could reverse their transfers.
Hey Goal 90 family, what's good? The World Cup season is here and you already know the vibes on this channel. So for everyone who's been rocking with us, Goal 90 Shop has World Cup jerseys for the whole squad. Men, women and kids. Whatever country you're repping, we've got ya. Home kits, away kits, clean classics and the loud ones. Instant match day energy. And it's love from us. Free shipping worldwide. Grab yours now and let's run this tournament together.
We'll start with Federica Chiesa. His move to Liverpool has not been what he hoped it would. His first season was completely marred by injuries, giving him the rockiest start to life in a new league. But his injury problems now seem behind him, as he has been fit for much of the current season. However, he has still had to feed on scraps in terms of minutes. In 2 years, Chiesa has now started a total number of 2 Premier League games, and he's surely not happy about that. Even with Ekitike, Salah and Isak out injured, Chiesa still cannot get meaningful minutes for Liverpool. It just seems like the coach doesn't fancy him, and he never will, no matter what the winger does. The Italian surely wishes he never made this move, and there's hard evidence to support the notion that Chiesa wishes he could reverse his transfer. In January, he tried to facilitate a return move to Juventus, but Liverpool stopped that from happening. If it was all in his hands, he would have totally reversed his transfer by now. Another player who almost certainly would have done that is Mason Mount. The midfielder took a massive risk by leaving Chelsea to join Man United back in 2023. He came up from the Chelsea Academy and had grown to become one of the most loved players at Stamford Bridge, thanks to his consistency, reliability, and of course, that Champions League winning assist. But suddenly, he decided to leave and practically forced a move out of the club. That is bad on its own, but the fact that he decided to move to rivals Manchester United made Chelsea fans totally turn on him. When you turn yourself into a villain in the eyes of your boyhood club, the only way you can come out of that on top is if you end up doing better with the new club than you ever did with the old one. Well, that has not been the case at all. Mount has become a shadow of himself since he moved to Manchester. Injuries have plagued him so much, and that has affected his Man United career badly. And what's interesting about this is that Mount never had injury issues at Chelsea, so could it be the change of environment that has caused him this much trouble? We have no doubt that Mason Mount sometimes lays on his bed and wishes he could just reverse his transfer, because absolutely nothing good has come out of his move to United. Speaking of players who left their boyhood clubs reminds us of Trent AlexanderArnold. Of course, you can argue that moving to Real Madrid was him taking a step up in his career, but when you carefully consider Trent's current situation, it makes sense to assume that a part of him wishes he could reverse that decision. First of all, he has had some injury issues since he moved to Spain, problems that didn't abound so much while he was in England. Also at Liverpool, he was a certified starter, the vice-captain, and one of the main men in the squad. He had the unending support of the fan base, with many of them even touting him as the best right-back in the history of the league. At Real Madrid, he just will never have that kind of die-hard support, and he is not even a guaranteed starter at the club, with Carvajal and even Valverde in the team. On top of that, he just doesn't seem as happy as he was at Liverpool, but the main reason we think he probably wishes he could reverse his transfer is because that move to Real Madrid appears to have cost him his place in the national team and at the World Cup. Thomas Tuchel just named a 35-man squad for the international break and still could not find a place for Trent, even with Reece James out injured. What this tells us is that Trent will very likely not be heading to the World Cup in the summer. But just think about it for a second. At this time last season, would Tuchel have even thought of leaving Trent out of his squad? Let's face it, if a move costs you a place in the World Cup, no matter how big that club is, you are likely to feel some regret over it, especially if you had already won all possible trophies at club level before making the move. Another player whose big transfer might cost him a place in the World Cup is Lucas Shiovalier. Last season when he was at Lille, he earned his France first team debut, and people started to say that he could compete with Maignan for the #1 shirt over the next couple years. Well, fast forward to the most recent call-up, and Didier Deschamps is only calling him up out of pity, but has now demoted him to #3. All it really takes is for Alphonse Areola to do a bit better in the Premier League and there would be no World Cup for Shiovalier. But beyond that, players want to play and Shiovalier is simply not doing that right now. His value has taken a nosedive since he moved to PSG, and while he might win a couple trophies sitting on PSG's bench, we're sure a part of him wishes he could reverse his transfer. Now, another player probably harbouring such thoughts right now is Nick Woltemade. He moved to Newcastle for big money in the summer, and his mindset was that he was going to be the Alexander Isak replacement up top. Well, after having started the season playing centre forward, the coach has now pushed the Germany international to a midfield role, one we're not exactly sure the player is the biggest fan of. Woltemade surely wants to play more in the attack and be amongst the goals, so perhaps a part of him wishes he could just reverse his transfer. And it's not like Newcastle are a much bigger club than Stuttgart anyway. After all, it was there he won his first major trophy as a professional footballer, and Newcastle doesn't seem like it'll be giving him a second anytime soon. On top of that, if Woltemade was at Stuttgart right now, he'd be looking forward to European football next season. At Newcastle, that seems rather unlikely looking at where they're currently sitting on the Premier League table. Also, you get a feeling that this could affect his standing with the national team. If he is hardly playing as a centre forward for his club, the coach might not be too convinced to give him the responsibility of leading the line at the World Cup. And in the midfield, there's just no way he's getting in ahead of Kimmich, Wirtz, Gross and Pavlovic. Another attacker who surely belongs on this list is Joshua Zirkzee. Since he moved to Man United, things have not exactly gone very well for him, have they? The different coaches have hardly played him. Instead, what he has got is a humiliating first-half substitution. Of course, Man United is a much bigger club than Bologna, but what's the point of being at a big club when you don't even play at all? Also, this move certainly cost him his place in the national team. At Bologna, Zirkzee was able to do enough to convince the coach to include him in the 2024 Euros squad, but since his move to England, he has lost his place in the Dutch squad, and he surely now has no hope of making it to the World Cup. Finally, we reckon Kylian Mbappe low-key wishes he could reverse his transfer. I mean, Real Madrid is a much bigger club than PSG, but looking at the success the French giants have enjoyed since his exit, a part of him surely wishes that he was the one leading that side right now. He could still go on to win the Champions League for Real Madrid, but we believe it would have been much more special for him as a kid born in Paris if he was able to lead PSG to their first ever Champions League trophy, securing the elusive Ballon d'Or on his way. It would surely have been the most beautiful story for him, and there's a probability that he thinks about it every now and then. Anyway, do you agree with our list? What other players do you think wish they could reverse their transfers? Give us their names in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Also, turn on the bell notification so you never miss out on new content. Catch you in the next one. Bye.
Hey Goal 90 family, what's good? The World Cup season is here and you already know the vibes on this channel. So for everyone who's been rocking with us, Goal 90 Shop has World Cup jerseys for the whole squad. Men, women and kids. Whatever country you're repping, we've got ya. Home kits, away kits, clean classics and the loud ones. Instant match day energy. And it's love from us. Free shipping worldwide. Grab yours now and let's run this tournament together.